in order to mitigate the difficulty of directing reading the code, source code, I have created a simple Echo server that can show how a simple TCP connection connected. Let's see the source code I have created. Here I've created two files, client and server C. The make file is just for compile. We can compile the source code server. Now we can run server. Okay, as you can see, the server is running on port 48, right? Okay, then we can run the client. Then we want to, for example, we want to input hello world. It will echo back. We will send something to server, so we will echo back. Then this is an echo server. Okay, pretty simple. Let's shut down. As you can see, here is the information printed from the server that the host come from this port. Then when we shut down the client, we close the connection, it will print the client closed. Okay, let's shut down the server. So let's go to the source code. We can analyze the source code first. As I showed in the mind map, here, in order to create a server or make a TCP connection, in the server side, we must have all these methods, right? And here, from read to write, we have to make a loop so that the server can continually communicate with a client until the client send a bye-bye. Then the server will close the connection, or the server close the whole server. Go to the code. First of all, we have to create a socket. In order to create a socket, if you don't know how to use this function, you can just check the document, man to socket. Okay, here the function requires 3 parameters: domain, type, and protocol. Okay, I have give the comments here. The first argument, the first parameter is you have to give the what kind of internet protocol you want to use. Maybe IPv4 or IPv6. Here we want to use IPv4. Then we want to make a TCP connection, right? Not UDP. So we give this socket stream. If you want to use UDP, you can check the documentation. Actually, is this one, socket datagram. It is short for datagram. Okay, procedure here means according to the previous 2 argument parameter, automatically choose what kind of connection you want to use. If this function return -1, which means get arrow, we have to put out the arrow. If you want to know how to use this one, p-arrow, let's see, where does it belong to? P-arrow, then to p-arrow. Oh, sorry, then 3 p-arrow. Okay, it belongs stdio.h. For example, we can do a test. For example, we use this one, 1000. It never happened in the socket parameter. So we can do a test. Then we run server. As you can see, this P arrow will print something like this one. You give the message first, create socket field, then it will follow the message protocol not support. Whenever you use the P arrow, like I give comments here, when error happens, the global variable error number will be setting accordingly, and this function will print create socket field with error message. Is that clear? Then after that, we go to minor map. We have to go to the bind. Bind pretty like, as I mentioned before, pretty like you have to bind a number or address. Here we mean IP address, right, to the server. In order let the client to connect to you, the number must be public, just like when we using browser, we know, okay, Google or Facebook, right? Actually, there are DNS servers that can translate the Google name to an IP address. Actually, finally, you have to use IP address to make a request. In order to use a bind, we can go to check the documentation meant to bind. Okay, as you can see here, first of all, it requires sys.socket.h, right? Here we have this header file included. Then we can go to bind. It requires socket, which is we already created the socket. Then the address we want and the length of the address. Okay, in order to use this is a composed data type. Since we cannot find any useful information from here about the composed data structure, you can Google to find how to use it, but for simplicity, I just create this one for you. You have to use this composed data structure. It's called struct socket address in. Socket address in is pretty actually is let's skip this one. You can use this structure, composed data structure. Then it requires 3 parameters. Necessary parameters. First of all, what kind of IP protocol you want to use? IPv4, IPv6, right? We want to use IPv4. Then second is port number. The third is address. The fourth is reserved. In most cases, you don't have to care about that. Okay. Here we give the port number. If you go here, we define a macro. Port number is 48, right? In order to use this data type, you have to include this header file, net inet/in.h. After that, first of all, we have to initialize this data type, right? We use b0. Actually, this function is defined in string header file. You can also use memset. Is another alternative way to initialize this data variable. Next thing is there's these three very important parameter we have to pass. First is the family, the protocol, IP protocol. We have to give this for IPv4, and we have to give port number. The next thing is use this one, INET address, to translate string to the system required data type. We can find the INET address. Where is the INET address function defined? Oh, sorry. Okay, the function is defined in RPAR inet.h. We have to include this one as well. Then after do all this, we have to we can start binding. Okay, after binding, we can go to the TCP server. We start listening. We can find a document listen. It requires two parameters. The first one is the socket we have created, and the second is if you check the documentation, it says the backlog parameter defines the maximum length for the queue of pending connection, which means this means how many clients try to connect to your server, because we don't fork more process. If you cannot understand what I'm talking following, you can just skip it. We will talk this more later, but right now I just give a brief explanation. The 5 just means just pretty like a queue. There are 5 people, maximum 5 people waiting there. Next thing we want to, okay, after listening, which means your server is pretty like running, then you have to print the information about which kind of interface and the port your server is listening. Okay, after that, since not only the server want to know the information about the client, so we have to pass the a data type, a variable like client address, in order to get the information from the connected client. The buffer is for receiving data from client. Here we have the buffer for during the data that we received from client. Then this is the length, right? Okay, nchar. We put one here. I will explain just here why we set one here. Okay, now we get into the loop. Reading, writing loop. We use the function accept. We accept the request from client. We can check the okay, this function requires 3 parameters. First is the socket we just created. Another is the client address, the data type. we have to store the information for the client, then the length of the previous data variable. Um, we create here, right? Okay. Oh, I think I can using B0 to initialize this client address, size of. Yes. Then whenever we get the request from client, the information of client will stored in this variable client address. Then if there's no error happen, if there's error happen, just print the error. If there's no error happen, we can print the information that which kind of host connect to our server. That's why we have to use this client address variable. Okay, we can find the inet. This means internet network to ASCII. We can find where is this function defined. Inet network to ASCII. Okay, it should be 3. Okay, this function is also defined in Opera inet.h. inet.h. We have to include this header file in the front of this file in order to use it. Then before using the buffer, we have to initialize this buffer, set all the information to 0. Then in order to sorry, this is not a if, this is a while. We get the loop, read write loop. Whenever the nchar, in order to run the loop, it must be, if the nchar is not to 0, we can run the loop, right? So that's why I set this one to 1, at least 1 character. Then we start using the read. We read data, we read request, or we read data from the client. The nchar means how many characters that we got to read from the client. Whenever we read data, we just store in the buffer, store information in the buffer. If there's no error happen, we print error. If there's no error happen, we continue to run. We use the write to return back the information, the same information to the client. But notice there's a difference between these two. Main difference is here we use the size of. Actually, the size of is not a function, it's operator. And we use this one to get the size of the buffer. The size of buffer is we define here. We define the here, this one buffer size 1024. We get the size of the buffer, which means the maximum information we can get is 1024 characters. But whenever we want to return back to the client, we only want to return back the necessary information, right? For example, the user send hello, just 5 character. We only want to give 5 character to the user, right? We don't want to return back 1024 character to user. It's not necessary. 1 is plus 1 is pretty means, because string you have to always at final you have to always use a not correct. Here is a not correct. Okay. Append at the end of a string to indicate this is a string. Then we write back or return back the same information to the client, because this is the echo server, right? Whenever you give me something, I return back to you. Then if there's continuous connection, we just read and write. If there's no, we just get out of this loop. Then we print client closed. Then we close this connection from client. If the server want to shut down, we just get out of this loop, while loop. Then we also have to close this server socket. Okay, that's the explanation of server-side source code.